welcome to the Mothers of All Crime. This is a podcast where we deep dive into the mothers involved in infamous crimes and scandals. I'm Monica, and this is Crystal.
This week we're going to talk about Amy Carlson.
Yes,
Who
please.
is also known as Mother God, and she's a kind of an interesting one. She kind of went from living a very small town life and then started what she does not define, but a lot of us define as a cult that kind of was based over in Colorado.
Yeah,
So,
I think actually a bunch of what I want to talk about is like what makes something a cult versus what makes it a religion versus what makes it like a club. And I have some different I have some different like definitions written down, but we can get into that. But I
yeah,
just thought it was
perfect.
interesting because it's referred to as a cult, and I guess you could say it is, but there are different ways to define it. So it's kind of like in the eye of the beholder, you know?
Oh, 100%. And nobody's gonna, if it is a cult and we decide that, she's not going to sit there and admit it, which I think is also a big thing that people wanted her to do while she was alive. So,
definitely.
But let's start at the beginning of her life because she wasn't always a cult leader.
No,
Amy
before
Carlson
she was mother.
Early. Yeah. So she had a very short life in the grand scheme of things. Born in 1975 in McPherson, Kansas. She grew up, had one sister in the home. Her parents divorced at a young age, and they kind of split time between the two. She was an honor student.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, it seems like that comes up a lot, the divorce stuff with her parents. Like that's in a bunch of the things that it was so traumatic for her. But yeah, keep going.
Well, yeah, because I think like what you're referring to is the abuse that started. And I think that triggered a lot of things. And you're going to see some influences from that abuse. Specifically, the abuse came from her stepmom. Yeah. And so her stepmother they did not like either of the girls. And Amy took the brunt of a lot of the abuse, and her father just kind of sat by and let it happen versus stepping in and protecting his children, which I think is foreshadowing to how she starts to view men down the line. Yeah. But one incident in particular that was consistent for Amy is she would get locked in a closet by her stepmother.
Very interesting.
It was their form of discipline. And they didn't get into a lot of specifics from the different sources that I found. They just kind of kept saying that there was a lot of abuse, physical, mental, specifically on both children, but Amy took the brunt of it. I don't know if Amy did it voluntarily or if they just like zoned in on her. That's kind of an interesting question.
I feel like when you're the oldest, like she was the oldest of three, right? And I'm also the oldest of three. And I feel like, I mean, I did not have a childhood like her at all, but I do feel like as the oldest, you do try to take the brunt of situations and like you're always trying to protect the young. I think it's like a natural thing for most people that you protect younger people, especially children. And like as an oldest sibling, you're like always kind of trying to do that. So I wouldn't be surprised if either she was targeted because she was the oldest or if she kind of put herself in harm's way because she felt like she had a responsibility to her sisters to take care of them.
Oh yeah, and I completely agree because it also interesting kind of foreshadows again, she loved her family, and that was really key. Is she loved her siblings, she loved her mom, and I think she had that protective nature for that aspect. However, she then starts dating. She starts dating at 19. She is dating a guy, not a great guy, gets pregnant. The guy leaves, and she has her first baby, 94. So
she's young.
Still stayed on. Yeah, being a young parent, not easy, particularly doing it by yourself. And so now she's going on. Very soon after, she meets another guy. I think her sister described him as toxic. Found out she was pregnant again, 97. Now she has two babies. He leaves also, completely by herself.
Mm.
And this is when her mom kind of starts noticing that Amy doesn't have that maternal instinct. Soon following, meets her third guy. She ends up marrying this one. Was with him for a while, but it seemed to be awful. There was a lot of claims of mistrust and abuse, but nothing formal. So the police were never actually called. There was always suspicions from outside people. And she had her third baby in 2000.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
3 different dads.
three kids by 3 dads is very stressful situation to be in.
Oh yeah.
It's just like logistically, it's very complicated.
And all dads were involved, they just weren't with Amy.
Right. Yeah, on the Dr. Phil show, because I've been trying to watch different like things that Amy was on, and on the Dr. Phil show, her sister said that by the time she was in her early 20s, she'd been married and divorced 3 times and had 3 kids with 3 different dads, and like that would be a lot for anybody to deal with.
Oh yeah.
That's like a fuck ton of trauma right there.
Right. And then having them be awful people on top of that.
Yeah.
But if you have a poor male role model growing up, it just kind of reinforces the direction you're probably going to go, unfortunately.
Yeah, and if you're used to being like abused and you haven't been shown love and kindness from your parents and step parents, people who should have been taking care of you and setting good examples for you, then I think it makes a lot of sense that she was drawn to people who were not good and were not taking care of her.
Right. And I think this is when she kind of started to unravel, and you start to see her new persona be born, for a lack of better words.
Well, that's when she was working at McDonald's, right?
Yeah, so she was super young. She had a manager at McDonald's. She pretty much ran the store.
I mean, that's not a bad job at all.
Oh, up until recently, I had no idea how much they actually make. Like, that's a great job for someone in their early 20s.
Like, if you work for like a chain of whatever, you like work your way up, you can make a lot of money like working in like corporate McDonald's or like in a managerial role. Exactly. It's like that with food stores and stuff too. Like, you can make like a really good living doing that. So that's what her mom thought she was going to be doing.
Yeah, so she had an opportunity to like truly make something of herself and like build a life for her kids and quote like get out of how she was brought up, because they keep saying like she was brought up very poor, very small town, like had to work herself to get anywhere. But then she took ecstasy.
Was it ecstasy or acid? Because I heard different things.
So
depending on
it started with ecstasy, and then she did acid. So she did both.
Okay.
And I think the ecstasy was like the awakening, and the acid was like the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, it sounds like she had a very long trip after that.
Oh yeah, I don't think it ever stopped. So that kind of started her spiritual awakening. She started diving into the internet, where there was talking about free spirits and the galactics and conspiracy theories, and she really started to embrace that viewpoint of things, where there is something else out there more powerful than us, kind of overarching the world.
She was trying to find religion and spirituality and things that align, things that resonate for her.
Her life, totally get it.
Totally.
However, the next thing I never will understand is in 2008, she went out to dinner with family and friends and then disappeared. She got up from dinner, left, all of her stuff was already packed, and she never came back. Left all 3 of her children, her family, her husband, her parents, and took off. To start with the man that she met online.
Is this Amaranth?
It is. Yep.
Is that how you say that? Amaranth?
I think so.
Such a lisp to say that name.
Yeah.
But he's also White Eagle. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For anyone who hasn't seen a picture of him, he just kind of looks like that stereotypical old hippie guy with like the
He
long
does.
beard and the free flowing attitude. Like he seems like a nice dude. It just seems very relaxed, hang out. The
Yeah. I
starships
think
are gonna bring me up one day.
I've definitely like hung out with lots of guys like that at like festivals. Like you see a guy like that at every festival you go
Yeah.
to. Like you could definitely like score some tabs of acid off of him. Like he just looks like he's
Yeah.
got some really good weed. Like he, that's the
He does
guy
give
that you
that
go
vibe,
to.
100%.
Yeah,
He definitely does.
100%. It's like he looks like a plug to me. But
Oh yeah.
I mean, he was an important like a foundational person in what would ultimately become Love Is One.
Yeah. So basically, Amy had started preaching different, I guess what you could call it, gospels of
Yeah.
how the universe started and how she's related to it. And he was like, wow, people need to hear you. And together they started the Galactic Free Press. And at that point, the term Mother and Father God was born. And that was
Appropriated.
2010.
Okay. Brings us to 2010.
Oh, yeah. So 2010, the two of them are online. They're sending this stuff out. They're doing blog posts and streaming. And Amy Carlson has officially taken on the role of Mother God
Yeah.
and
She's
building up like
God.
people.
She's God. She's a cult leader. She's an influencer.
Oh,
She wears a
yeah.
lot of hats. She's an internet
And
god.
it's crazy because I've watched a variety of her stuff. And at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, it started off what feels very innocent. It feels
Yeah,
very
I would
like
agree.
wholesome. Like I want the world to be better and I see myself as this role to help people and guide them into spirituality. It feels very positive. A little weird in my opinion, but positive. like
Definitely weird, but it's not that scary in her
right.
early stuff. And she was very pretty and normal looking in the beginning, also, which I
Oh,
think
yeah.
has a lot to do with the success as like a influencer
Yeah.
in this case. Like she was like a cult leader, but she was also an influencer. And I think like because she was so pretty and normal looking, that people like really respond to that and are
Yeah.
more easily drawn into that.
Oh, 100%. And then she has a very sweet voice, so it's not harsh to listen to either.
Right.
When, because like if you're listening to like, you go to church or something, you want to hear something a little bit more interesting of a voice, even if you don't necessarily listen to the words. It's hearing the
That's true.
person. It's just a weird thing to say, but think about all the
No,
times
that's
you've
true.
gone to like any lecture. You're like, oh, they're kind of nice. You don't know what they're talking about, but yeah, all right, I'll listen to that. like,
Yeah, she's pleasant.
right. So they start building up all of these like people that would watch her consistently. And there was one in particular that she connected with, Miguel Lamboy,
Mm-hmm.
who this was about 2 years later. So she had 2 years of building this group that came consistently to listen to her stuff. And they connected. And she basically ran away with this man, left Father God number one, and her and Michael went off to start their own group and really put Amy at the top. Because originally it was like the two of them together, and Miguel really believed that Amy was Mother God. She was God reincarnated into the earth, and she had healed cancer before and could truly fix the planet. And the
Yeah,
two
I
of them
mean,
went out to Colorado.
Michael's speaking from experience too, because apparently Amy cured his stage 4 cancer. So,
Right.
I mean, it's incredible.
All
I
online. They had never met.
yeah, that's when she started doing her healings on the internet,
Yes.
where her like etherical surgeries and stuff. So she cured his stage 4 lung cancer. So anybody would be very grateful for that.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
And this is kind of when the liquidation started. So
mhm.
anyone who joined after this point was renamed. with their spiritual name and
Mm-hmm.
their spiritual position for her galactic team.
Right.
And his new name became Archangel Michael. And that was his
Right.
position in her group.
And he never became Father God.
No, there are rumors that he was an unofficial father god for the interim.
Wow.
Because a lot of people kind of say that Amy was never able to be alone from a man. She always needed that partnership. He was never given the title of father god, but there's no question in my mind that they didn't have a more intimate relationship during that period. It
I
was
think
about 2
that
years before she had another father god, and there's
I think Mother
no
was
way.
getting down a lot. I think that she always needed male attention, and it's I don't know. I mean, I get it kind of on one level, but it's like, you're God. Do you really need like all of these men? But
Mm-hmm.
she just didn't want to be alone. So
Yeah.
she was always having another angel promoted to archangel. She was finding guys and calling them Father God. And she
Mm-hmm.
really didn't go very long without having somebody there as like the main point person taking care of her.
Right. So that's why I'm like, I think he got the title of Archangel rather than God because he was like a filler to her.
Mm-hmm.
Because fast forward 2 years, 2014, we have a man that she met during one of her live chats, thought he was cute, invited him to come live with her and Michael, and his name was Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
He was sold. He was in a very, I think, fragile time in his life. He was addicted to drugs. He was struggling with probably some mental health. Came out and joined this group in person. And he became Father God number 2. Which, again, for him, anyone who hasn't seen him, he is that clean cut, preppy. He kind of gives me like lacrosse boy vibes.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I kind of like that the Father Gods all look different from each other.
I
They
agree.
all
She
have
definitely
very
does not
different
have a
vibes.
type.
No, she doesn't have a type. I mean, he's a very
Um,
far cry from White Eagle.
oh, night and day. But he was interesting where he kind of came in, and so White Eagle started, like, gave that support to start. And Andrew, I feel, gave the ability for it to grow. He was a tech guy. He built a website. He
Right.
has the catchy phrase. He's responsible for Love Has Won. And that built with him the foundation of what it all is.
What do you think of that name? Love is One.
Um, it's weird, but I get it from listening to her because she kind of looks at the whole support. One of her main tenets, I guess, is she is pure, unconditional love to the world, and she is going to rid it of the negative energies so that other people can be enlightened.
So sweet of her.
I know. And that's a lot to put on a website. So you really got to shorten it.
I mean, I kind of like the name, but
Mhm.
I feel like it it reminds me a lot of like when gay marriage was getting legalized, and it would be
Yeah.
like love, like I feel like that's what people were saying was love has won, and
Hmm.
also like love is love, and like it all kind of feels like the same thing, and they use a lot of rainbows and stuff with love is
Right.
one, the
If you
cult.
click on it, I never would have picked this as that link.
Yeah, but like they were not here for the LGBTQ. They were
Hmm.
very homophobic and heteronormative, even though it's a
Right.
matriarchal religion.
Oh, yeah.
But they were not down for the
Underlining.
LGBT.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say the underlining, which I think we'll get into as things kind
Yeah.
of spiral.
Mm-hmm.
The underlining beliefs are, like you said, very homophobic, very racist, oddly a little patriarchal, minus
Yeah.
having a female leader.
Patriarchal for sure. And also anti Semitic was a big theme
Oh,
that
yep.
kept coming up again and again. Kind of
Yeah.
pro-Hitler, even, which is an odd
Yes.
stance to have in like
Mm-hmm.
2010. Like, it's
Right. Because, I mean,
bizarre.
we should totally just talk about that now. What
Yeah, let's talk about it.
this group was like very supportive of most conspiracy theories. So
Yes.
like 9/11 didn't happen. Sandy Hook was a hoax to cover something up. The Holocaust wasn't real
They're very
because Hitler
QAnon.
is a good person and was working for the light.
They
That
literally said that Hitler could just see that Jews were trying to get out of working and they wanted everyone else to work. And that's why they were put in concentration camps so they could
Mhm.
learn to work.
And he was using the light to help take the negative energies from the Jewish people out so that the rest of the world could thrive. Wild. Like,
Wild. And her
particularly in this
followers
day
are
and
just
age.
saying this with their whole
Oh,
chest. They're like,
they're
Hitler
on
was
board.
great. Yeah. The
Like,
fact
there
that
was a
you can get
live
all these people to
stream
film
of
themselves
them.
saying this stuff.
I know. There was a live stream. I think it was Hope and Aurora, if I remember, who we'll mention in a bit,
Mm,
that were very much like, yeah, 100%, this is true. And we
yep.
know it sounds terrible, but like, here's why. And it's just that, again, that manipulation brainwash of like, you talk in a circle so that people eventually kind of don't follow what you're saying. And then they're like, oh, I guess maybe, I don't know. And it's the 20th century and they're still on board.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
100%.
And for like, there are some that you and I both lived through. Like, we both remember Sandy Hook happening and parts of 9/11 happening. And
Oh, yeah.
to have
I remember
someone
9/11
say
happening. Where did you
that,
live
like,
when 9/11 happened?
I was in Massachusetts at that time.
Okay, that's not that far. I was in New
No,
Jersey, so it
right.
was like a huge fucking deal here. Huge
Yeah.
deal.
But Sandy
And
Hook, like, I had
definitely
friends
happened.
who grew up in that elementary school.
Yeah.
So,
I
like,
mean,
they weren't at there at the time, but like
right.
years before, because we're not that young.
And I didn't need to be alive for the Holocaust to know that that was not good.
Right.
Very hot
And
take
like,
to think that the Holocaust was good.
to imagine
Or it
that
didn't
everyone's like,
happen.
no, it's all fake. Like,
But they talk.
also, who's gonna put in the amount of effort to make that real feeling for it not to have happened? I just don't understand.
But they contradict themselves so much because in the
Mhm.
same video, I watched one of the members say that the Holocaust did not happen. And in that same video, the same member saying that concentration camps were used to teach Jewish people to work.
Right,
So was that not the Holocaust that you're talking about?
right.
It was a whole
I
separate thing.
and they never would really answer it. They would just circle back again.
It was a lot of circular talking, a lot of logic that only worked if you created new truths,
Hmm.
which, I mean, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts.
Oh yeah. So, but let's get it. So we have a little bit of a foundation of it.
Yeah.
Moving forward, Andrew was not always father. Andrew
Right.
started to kind of push back, which I think anyone can assume that when you start pushing back against leadership of a group like this, it's not going to end well for you. Um, he
Definitely.
started to truly care about Amy, but also was like starting to realize that she was a little too invested. He looked at this as like a philosophy, and she was truly starting to believe it, that I am Mother God, you do what I want, you serve me. And every once in a while, he would be able to get her to actually admit that it wasn't real, that they were high 24/7, they were drinking 24/7. Of course,
Yeah,
you're going to
that's an
believe some weird
important
stuff.
that's important to the foundation of this group is that it was all decided in like drug induced hazes
Hmm.
what they were going to believe and what they were going to do. But I think it's also very easy to feel pretty grandiose about yourself if you're messed up all the time. Like she was
Right,
never ever sober. So she
right.
wasn't looking at it with a clear head. And if everyone's gassing you up and telling you that you're Mother God, like I just think it was probably easy and really nice for her to just be like, yeah,
Oh,
totally.
yeah. Listen, who doesn't
Everyone
want to be
bow down
told
to
they're
me.
amazing every day? Like,
Exactly. Exactly.
but Andrew, I think, is interesting from a father perspective because there are more to come. He is the
Mm-hmm.
only father that left her. He
Man.
basically was like, you know what, I see where this is going, basically, and I'm out. Like, this is not what I signed up for. And he left in, I think it was like 2015 ish. Not a clear date that I could find for when he left, but somewhere between 2015 and 2017, he left. But this was the same
Yeah.
time that all these people physically started to join her because she had her online following, but now she was building a group around her to be with her physically every day.
Yeah. The transition from online preaching to having people move in with you is
Mm-hmm.
interesting. And I
Yep.
think that you see that in a lot of these really insular religious groups that they all have to live together because
Yeah.
otherwise, like, how are you going to keep everyone accountable?
Mm-hmm. And she had people from all walks of life starting to join her, but they were all people who had something either traumatic recently happen in their life, they were coming out of addiction, or they were addicted, they were having a spiritual crisis. There was always some kind of weak point for each of these people, and each of them was different from the ones that I found. So we'll start with some of the more prevalent ones.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned Hope earlier. Hope's actual name is Ashley. She
Right. Because
is
they all have
from,
fake names.
yes, you have to have your spiritual name and then your
Right.
spiritual position.
Right.
um, she was from Massachusetts, actually, as well.
Oh, look at that.
I know. She was given the title of Archangel and Oracle later down the line.
Mm.
Another big one is Aurora, whose original name is Lauren. Also, Archangel and Oracle. She was from Florida. And then I think another big one here is Faith, who
Right.
um, last name originally is Lowe's. She was brought in as another healer to help Mother with her um,
Her surgeries.
spiritual healings and her surgeries. Yes, which
She needed a
ranged
lot of
from like
healers for that.
80 to 100 and was it 150, I think, dollars, depending on how long you needed with them.
Well, they
Um,
could last for 20 minutes, for an hour. It like really
yeah,
depends on how much you need.
and they were treating things, and this is where I couldn't help but laugh, but some stuff like stomach problems, totally like, okay, migraines, you can give me some advice for that. That sounds great. But then it went into treating things like cancer and hydration. How are you going to heal me online with my hydration problem? Like, I have questions.
I mean, she could cure stage 4 cancer. She could do
True.
open heart surgery
Mhm.
virtually. I mean,
Brain
brain surgery. She could
surgery.
shrink tumors.
Yeah,
Incredible.
I
And on the
know.
Dr. Phil show episode with them, which was like my favorite of all the
Oh,
content I've watched about Mother God, the Dr. Phil episode was my fucking favorite.
they
But
were so
they
serious, and I loved it.
they were so serious, and they were saying that Mother God had performed over 100,000 of these like etherical operations, these healings that she did, and he did some math and was like, well, if you've been doing this every day for the last 10 years to get these kind of numbers, you'd have had to do at least 18 a day without ever taking a day off. And she was like,
Right.
uh-huh, yep,
Oh yeah.
totally.
Hmm.
And
Oh yeah.
Hope and
100%.
Aurora are just like, yeah, we've seen her do it. We've seen her
Which
cure everyone.
again is that like that hype team that you have to have. Like Hope and Faith
Yeah.
and Aurora really were the three main like hype girls for her. They were
Yes.
like the right hand men that or woman that really did everything that mom needed. And I think that
They
plays a
were
huge factor as we keep going.
they were very all in. They were very
Hmm.
invested. I mean, it's nice
Yeah.
to have friends that that, I guess, that
Oh
always have your
yeah.
back.
Diehards.
They
But then you
100%
had
believe
like
her.
the lower levels. You had people named Buddha, Mother Mary, Uncle T. Moira. You had a bunch of people totaling to about 20, they think, that were with her full time, 24/7, kind of preaching with her. And then one that I want to mention specifically, who was a lower person, was Erin. We don't know Erin's full name. We don't know really where she's originally from. But Erin and her 3 children,
Ugh.
she left her family, brought her 3 children to join Love is Blind.
There was children living in that house with her.
Yeah.
It was
unclear
upsetting.
how many were always there, but from what I pretty much gathered, there was at least 2 kids in that house at all times.
Yeah. I definitely have seen plenty of videos and live streams where there are children in them.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's get through the timeline, because I would definitely want to.
We'll circle back to that.
Yeah.
All right. So
kids starred in the notes.
Moving forward, Mother now has her full kind of covenant with her. And she has a new father god, who is one of the ones that came in during this time. And his name is Jonathan. Mm-hmm. John Robertson, specifically. He was a former Marine, left the service, and then was kind of having a spiritual crisis. Fell upon Mother God's website, started listening to things. She saw him in the stream, directly messaged him and was like, "Why don't you come live with us?" So he went out, they met, and he became Father God number 3. And for a visual for you guys, he was a tall, kind of a longer hair, he grew out a beard, thinner guy, kind of gives off like survivalist, like, I think. Like he could go live in the woods and it wouldn't surprise me and like survive. Like
yeah. I believe he was the one that prior to moving there, he had been homeless in Las Vegas. He was he had real homeless guy vibes.
Yeah, that too. Yep. Yeah. Although I will say he seemed like the sweetest one out of all of them. Like he truly cared about her. He wanted the best for the group. He actually started being like, I know I'm not the last one, but like I'm happy to be here, which I thought was interesting.
That's such self-awareness.
Yeah.
Very rare.
Yeah, particularly with groups like this. He was very much, I'm going to play my part and then I'm done. But he was probably one of the more short-lived ones, because I couldn't really figure out a date that he became Father God, but it was sometime between 2015 and 2017 when Andrew left as well. Because 2018 comes around, which is very quick, the last Father God came out, who was crazy, to say the least. Jason Castillo.
This is the only one that's crazy.
Oh yeah, no, everybody else was like very genuine, very kind, appearing. All of them had issues individually, don't get me wrong. A couple of them have rap sheets, a couple of them had their addiction issues, mental health, whatever it is. But Jason was the only one that had a legitimate rap sheet with a multitude of things on it from multiple states, including child abuse, child neglect. He was a meth addict.
This is the one that was homeless in Las Vegas. I totally am besmirching the previous Father God. There's so many fathers.
Poor Jake. I know. Listen, like we said before, the girl couldn't be alone.
It's like my mom always has a new boyfriend.
Oh yeah, I know. And she always had like, it seemed, they always say like she always with the toxic men. Personally, Andrew and John, didn't seem very toxic, and neither did White Eagle. They all seemed kind of nice on the out front. Like,
I think the fact of it is that Amy was the toxic one.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Which we'll get into because she starts to spiral.
Yeah.
She meets Jason. Jason very quickly joined this group. he became father god number 4, and he almost instantly was like, this is my group. He became aggressive with the members and was like, you're going to bow down to me, basically. And there are videos of him, and I think this is when the group itself started becoming toxic internally. There's videos of him screaming at members and them physically flinching away from him. So from an outside, that to me seems, okay, he's definitely snapped and put his hands on some people before, that you have that reaction so easily with him just getting upset.
I mean, he had very, like, watching him talk, like, he seemed like he was really high all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I just kept thinking is, like, they're like, oh, he formerly used meth. I think he's currently using meth in all of these videos because he seems like he is.
So it came out he was actively using while he was in this group.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when
that was my main
talking to police. Yeah, he was actively using. Yep.
Okay. I didn't catch that confirmation.
Oh yeah.
Good to know
my one of the police reports when he was like, well, you know, when I wasn't high then. And they were like, well, what does that mean? Like
oh man, he seemed like he was high a lot.
Oh yeah, he was a gem. But Mother God loved him, and she would tell her followers that she would take on these terrible men to remove them from society to help the community. Because once again,
I used to do that too.
So selfish.
Like when I was like a teenager, I like thought it was my job to really just take all of the toxic worst men I could find and really just
because we can fix them, obviously. Yeah.
My success rate was about as good as hers, but oh man, thank you, Mother, saving the world.
She was leading
one
a good
scumbag at a time.
So at this point, she kind of starts bopping around between Colorado, Oregon, and California. Different areas, which we can get into in a bit, but
sure,
we're going to fast forward a bit to her life kind of starting to fall apart. And in 2019, she starts to get sick.
Yes.
And from an internal perspective, they basically were saying that the reason Mother was starting to get sick, she was losing her ability to move, her nerves were going out, she was getting ill, was because humanity wasn't accepting her. They were not supporting the movement and getting on board to enlighten themselves, and they were killing her. Externally, she was going into liver failure. And she was getting silver poisoning because one of their tenets was to drink colloidal silver, which is not good for you.
I looked it up because I wasn't aware of colloidal silver prior to Mother God introducing it to me. And I was like, oh, like what is that supposed to be used for? And prior to the invention of antibiotics, it was used to treat infections. It's supposed to be used topically. It's supposed to be used on your skin. You're not supposed to ingest it. So I looked up what happens if you ingest colloidal silver. And one of the main things that happens is liver damage and kidney damage.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
there's a fun side effect as well.
Which was very noticeable towards the end. Yes. She was blue. Like Smurf blue. Her skin was blue.
I thought they were exaggerating until they started putting pictures of her like right before, a couple days before she died, like blue. Why? She kind of looked, by the time she passed, she looked like a corpse that was smurfed. It was insane.
Yeah. You know, one of the responding officers that came to the house when they eventually find her body, which we can talk about, he thought that she had been painted blue.
Can you imagine?
He was like, oh my gosh, they painted her. And they're like, no, she's just decomposing. And it's like, no, she's blue from the inside out. But if you hadn't seen her prior to her death, you wouldn't realize that she was blue for months.
Right. So because she was drinking, I think they said about a half a liter a day of this stuff, which is a lot of liquid regardless of what it is, but
Yeah.
that's crazy. And then the sicker she got, the more she drank because they believed that it was going to help her. And the reason that everybody else wasn't taking it is because they would make it incorrectly, and that's why they had other problems previously. But if Mother God made it, then it's okay. It's everybody else who was the problem.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about her death?
Yeah. So the only thing I want to talk about before her death is during this time, as she was dying, one of their beliefs is that she was going to be evacuated from the earth by her galactic team, who we'll talk about after this. And in order to be ascended with the team, she needed to be 103 or 104 pounds and it near the ocean because there was going to be a portal through the ocean for the starship to come down and get her. Mm-hmm. Amy is 5'4", just for perspective. So 103, 104 pounds at 5'4". And
pretty little.
Yeah, tiny. So she went to Hawaii because the Galactics told her that she had to be in Hawaii. That's where she would ascend. Where she picked
They're telling me that too.
I know. I also should go. We should test that theory. Yeah. She went out to Hawaii. Basically started a riot in Hawaii because she claimed a new name, and we'll go through her names in a minute. But she basically claimed to be a goddess of Hawaii, and they were not having it. They basically bullied her off the island, where you're not going to come in here and say you're one of our goddesses. I think it was a volcanic and healing or dreams or something. I'm blanking on what it is. Either way, they kicked her off the island. She did not ascend. She came back to the mainland.
She was straight up being a haole. Like, that's why Native Hawaiians don't fuck with white people, because we go and just like appropriate the culture completely. And Amy loved to appropriate culture. That was like the main thing that she was doing. Is she was
doing great.
She was doing internet research on stuff and then claiming it as her identity, which
here it is.
Is very relatable.
Goddess of fire and volcanics and the giver of dreams.
Wow.
July it's got a ring 2020. To it does, but they were not having it. So she left. And she was only there for a handful of months, came back to Colorado. Again, bopped around a couple states. Then she ended up in Oregon, Ashland, in a hotel where she was pretty much, it was April 21. She was on the last of her days.
And the cops came several times to do wellness checks because people were seeing her state and calling because they were very concerned about her, and she's in a hotel. So
you
people
had
are seeing her.
Staff concerned, you had outside people concerned, but then she also was reaching out to family that she hadn't talked to in years. So she had called her sister in January. She texted her daughter, basically being like, "I love you. If you want to visit me, you can." Which was interesting because she hadn't talked to them in decades.
She was also asking her followers to bring her to a hospital. And they were like, no, like, you don't need that. You're beyond that. So she really created her own.
Her demise, because they were just listening to what she had taught them, which backfires.
Well,
but then
on the Dr.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, on the Dr. Phil show, she said that she had stage 5 cancer.
Which makes me, I'll fully admit it. And when I listened to that, I was like, that's not a thing, right? Like, I had to remind myself that that's not a thing.
I mean, I think it stops at stage 4, which
it does. 100% does. But it's interesting when you and I are watching these things and reading these articles, knowing what we're looking at, and I still had that moment of going, wait a minute, that's not a thing, right? I had to think about it for a second.
Well, Amy says everything like it's a fact.
Yes.
And that if you don't agree with her, you're just not looking at it correctly.
You're the idiot.
Basically. Yeah. It's like, ugh. How could you possibly disagree with Mother
Oh,
God?
yeah. All right, so that brings us to April 16th, 2021 at 6 p.m. Amy died. She died at 75 pounds.
Way too light to be ascended.
I know, that's probably the reason. Um, but so her followers at that point kept, even though she had died, kept moving her limbs to keep her body loose, still was putting silver down her throat. Um,
Oh,
and then
so
at 10
sick.
o'clock, they were like, people are going to get suspicious. So they packed her up into the car and drove her. And they
Back to
went
Colorado.
camping. Yep. Stopped to
Camping.
go camping. Yep. Where Father God, number 4, slept in the same tent with the corpse, which is gross.
They were not freaked out by having a dead
No,
body with them at all.
totally fine. Totally
But
on
they
board with
also
it.
thought that they had to keep the body because the Galactics were going to come for it.
Yes. So
So,
Galactics were going to come down and still get Mother, body included, and bring her
right.
up. So then April 29th, well, 20, I think 27th, they got to Colorado, which is at the home that Archangel Michael owned.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day, Michael went to the police and were like, there are people with a dead body in my house,
Oh
which is
my gosh.
interesting.
Yeah, it says that he found the body April 27th. So she'd already been dead for.
12 days.
So the last time someone had seen her alive was April 10th. They think she
Mm-hmm.
died on the 16th.
Mm-hmm.
And then April 27th is when he found the body and
Yeah.
reported it to the police April 28th.
Yeah. And then on the 29th, the police arrived at the home at like 11 p.m., almost midnight.
Yeah.
And
And in the documentary on, is it Hulu, HBO?
I
The
think it's HBO.
the the cops show up and there are just all these people hanging out in the house. There are kids there. There are kids sleeping,
There was a
and
13-year-old and a 2-year-old.
they just keep saying that mother is resting. Mother has rested.
Mm-hmm.
And
And oh God, she was wrapped up in blankets, Christmas lights, and glitter
glitter
in
eyeshadow.
bed. Yes.
Her eyes had
Um,
decayed to the point where the sockets were completely sunken in and it looked like she had no eyes. But there's still
oh yeah.
glitter all over
Mm-hmm.
the place. Yeah, and that's when the cops noticed that she was blue,
Mm-hmm.
which is not a stage of decomposition, but
No.
probably what they also were kind of thinking. Like, but
And
also,
one
I
thing
don't
they
know
kept
what a dead body looks like for days after
gross.
when you
It
just
looks
keep it in a
gross.
room temperature room like that.
Well,
Yeah.
they
Oh,
had
definitely.
mummified it, which I think is also interesting, where it
Ugh.
definitely slowed decomposition. So rigor mortis sets in about 2 hours. It fully will be done in about 12 if you don't touch the body. But they kept moving it, so it kept it
Ugh.
loose. And they kept saying that like there was reactivity coming off and energies coming off and electromagnetic, but that is also a sign of decomposition. A body
Yeah,
decaying
they were
can
like,
give off those same energies.
her body never got cold. It's like we knew she was coming back because her limbs were warm again. It's like, no, rigor mortis just ended already
Yeah.
because it's been so long.
Mm-hmm.
Blech.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
And I can't even imagine how that would smell. And keep in mind,
Oh
people are
god.
sleeping in the same room with her. They're driving in a car with her. And the smell, you were just fine with it. But all right. So then basically, everyone in the house got arrested. The charges were all dropped. No one was formally charged with anything as of right now. Um, Love is One did continue for about a year after mom's death and then kind of dismantled, and everybody's now doing their own thing.
Yeah.
Um,
There are new groups under new
there are,
names
yes,
with like former
subsections.
members leading them. But it doesn't seem like anybody has like the kind of traction that Love has
Right.
won. At least not yet.
And I think also the traction now too is just curiosity versus like belief.
Yeah.
So where do you want to start first
Oh,
about
I don't
concerns?
know. Because, so, hmm, I feel like usually I would be like, we should focus on the crimes that she committed. But
Yeah.
it's
Well, the
sort
crimes
of.
for her are subtle, I feel, compared to some
Mhm.
other people we are going to talk about. But looking at her children was one thing for me that, and
Poor
not even
kids.
her, just her kids, but the other children around her. And because she abandoned her children, there was neglect in her own home. Her youngest daughter, the reason her youngest daughter went to live with her grandmother, which was before Amy left, was because she was found alone, naked with a diaper on, in a house at like 2 or 3 years old, and Amy was like nowhere to be found, which is a problem for anyone with a brain. And like she
Yeah, I
has
mean,
two other
Amy was
kids,
a real piece of shit. She really was. She
but then
was
she
an
started doing
alcoholic.
stuff to other people's children.
Yeah, on Dr. Phil, because I was struggling initially. Like, I watched the documentary on HBO, and I was like, well, they're freaks. This is really
Hmm.
weird. But I don't actually have like a moral or ethical issue with it because, like, whatever people want to do, I'm kind of cool with.
Right.
And
If you're not
then
hurting
you see that
anybody.
but then you see that there are like kids in the background of all of these live streams. And
Hmm.
then on the Dr. Phil show, they were showing clips, and one of them was Amy putting a child in timeout in a closet.
Yeah.
Who that kid looked about 2 years old, and he was
Hmm.
locked in a closet with the door closed for 2 minutes and then 4 minutes, and you could just hear this kid screaming, and
Hmm.
it sounds terrifying.
Yeah. And everyone just
And
standing around.
yeah. And
But
she said
interestingly,
that she
it's this
learned that from her
same,
own children,
I was going to say,
which
but it's the same thing that happened to her when she was a little girl. Her
it is.
stepmother put her in a closet as
Yeah.
a form of what we can assume is discipline. Who knows what the reason was? But one thing that she would say a lot is you need to cut cords to everything and everyone except your mother and father, meaning her and whoever Father God was. And
Mm.
the people in her group cut off all communication and contact with their blood families. And when you do that, you kind of put yourself in a circumstance that you have to listen and conform. And Erin's three children, Erin was encouraged to abandon her three children at one point when they moved to a different state to still be with mother. So Erin just left her kids with a relative, and we're like, goodbye.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Scientology in some ways, where it's your your children are basically they're adults. They're other adults that are
Mm-hmm.
just in the group, and they could
Yeah.
be members, maybe not, but like you don't have these obligations to care for them in the way that I think most people view children.
Right.
Um, but I think that maybe we should just get into the cult of it all and
Mm-hmm.
what the cult was, what they were believing, and what a cult is in general, and maybe talk about, I guess, the problems associated with that, because
Yeah.
that's because I was like, well, what makes this a cult? I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if our listeners know this, but I am a very staunch atheist. I was brought up Catholic, and those beliefs do not resonate with me. And so I am like a very not religious person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if I'm going to have some hot takes on this, but some of the things that they are talking about, like Amy is Mother God, and she's
Mm-hmm.
19 billion years old, and she's been
Reincarnated.
reincarnated 534 times.
Mm-hmm.
She's here to fight the cabal, which is the forces of evil. She's going to lead 144,000 people to the fifth dimension, which I do want to talk about the fifth dimension.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all of these things, it sounds very Scientology to me, but a lot of these things are also just stolen from Christianity, which you see in a lot of Christian cults as well.
Mhm.
And so to me, just to me, all this stuff sounds just as far-fetched as other religions. Like, I don't actually really have a problem with any of the stuff that they're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess people found it really offensive that she was saying that she had previously been Jesus in another lifetime. But she
Oh
was
yeah,
a lot
she
of different
had
people.
a list. It was Jesus, Joan of Arc, Marilyn Monroe was one of my favorites.
I like that Donald Trump
Cleopatra.
was her father in another lifetime, even though
Yep.
she's not.
And Elvis
It
was a
doesn't make sense.
child. Elvis was her child in a different
Oh, yeah.
lifetime, which is interesting that she'll talk about Elvis being her child, but she doesn't talk about her living children. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so what you're referring to is part of her galactic team, which were
Mhm.
spirits in that would communicate with her and guide her into behaviors, actions, and choices for herself and others. And her main leader, which made me so angry, was Robin Williams.
Oh.
How dare you take that pure man's name in vain? Um,
The whole time I'm like, if they talk about Robin Williams so much.
almost
They
as much as Mother.
there's literally I saw a video of Amy of Mother saying that within 20 minutes of Robin Williams' death, he appeared in her room.
Yeah.
And he was so instrumental in everything that they did, and he was a
Mm-hmm.
key figure, and he's on all of the websites, and his picture is used.
Everywhere.
And I would be so mad if I was related to Robin Williams. I'm mad and I don't know him.
Oh
But
yeah.
he had absolutely nothing to do with this group. He had no idea that Amy existed,
Mm-hmm.
and she just chose him at random. I couldn't
I
find
think
any logic behind why she picked Robin Williams.
nobody in this galactic team makes any sense. There's people
Yeah.
like Robin Williams, I think, is just, he was such a pure person that people loved, so it helped credibility. But you also had people like Michael Jackson, and I think they showed a frame in the documentary. Tupac, I think, was on there, and like the most random people.
I
And
was unclear about what that collage of people was. They had a
the collage
collage of
of
all different
people
celebrities, and
was the
they
galactic team.
because she had been some of those people in previous lives, but not all of them.
Yeah, from what I understand is the ones that she previously was her coming back and helping the current, because every reincarnation was a comet contract with the current Earth to help the people, to cleanse the earth basically. And she would come back and help herself through different lifetimes,
She
which
had a
is
lot of lifetimes, some of which
a lot of
overlapped.
work. Oh yeah, apparently in more than one life we were more than one person.
Like, I don't understand how you could be Marilyn Monroe but also have Donald Trump be your father.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense
And
to me.
Elvis was your
Like, what
son,
lifetime?
but Elvis's
Right.
mother, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because if it, I mean, it doesn't make sense. So we're trying to make it make sense, but it doesn't
Yeah,
make
and it's not
sense.
going to, for sure.
And I know that she stole a lot of things from like sci-fi movies and from
Mhm.
the Bible and probably stuff she'd seen in movies about the Bible because
Yep.
like 144,000, like that's a number that comes up a lot in Christianity and like in
In so
Judaism,
many
like
different
that's
religions.
a very significant number. So I think she just picked these different buzz phrases that would kind of
Yep.
light in someone's head where it's like that sounds like I've heard that before in a
Right.
different
This
way.
makes sense. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it makes sense, which I mean, again, none of it makes sense. But
Yeah.
a
Well,
cult,
she
though.
started that cult, and she's adamant it wasn't a cult. I think everyone around her, other than the members, because the members still don't claim that it's a cult, but anybody who has left the group absolutely
Mhm,
is like, this is a cult. And
definitely.
then you
Have
have,
you ever listened to the podcast Cultish?
yes,
So I
love
had
that.
not listened to it prior to um, Mother God. So
Mm-hmm.
it was interesting and I enjoyed it, but it's a Christian podcast, which I
Mm-hmm.
didn't realize until I was listening to it. And the entire time, their whole issue with it is that it was a ripoff of Christianity, and that the problem with it is that they just didn't have the truth of Christianity. And it's like, is
Right.
that the
Interesting.
problem? Is that
Well, it's
that
all
the
the
problem?
perspective, right? Like,
Yeah, definitely.
what,
Which I think it really clicked for me why I didn't think I had a problem with it.
yeah. Well,
I
so
was like,
let's look at some of your definitions of cults, because
okay.
my definition that I understand with is a group of people with a common belief under a charismatic leader.
Okay.
And I think
There are
that kind of,
multiple.
oh, there's so many. But I think
Yeah,
that's one that I resonate with that fits so many other groups. Because
it does.
obviously, then you have your sub requirements of like a narcissistic leader that you need to have as well. But you can't get that amount of people without some kind of charismatic personality. No one's going to join someone who everybody hates.
So one of the one of the more popular ways to define a cult is as a small religious group that is not part of a larger and more accepted religion, and that has beliefs regarded by many people as extreme or dangerous. Which
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think applies to this, but it's kind of like open to your interpretation still. That's not really, it's not like a hard definition to me. Like, it's regarded by, beliefs that are regarded by many people as extreme or dangerous. It's all kind of subjective. But
Mm-hmm.
if you look up a secular um, cult, like an opponent of cult definition, it's a group that tends to manipulate, exploit, and control its members. And I like that better because it
I
takes
like that
out
better as well.
the beliefs are kind of whatever. Like, it is the problem with it to me, because my problem is not that it's not the truth of Christianity. That's not my fucking
Mm-hmm.
problem with it. My problem with it is, let's suspend our reason. Let's put all of our beliefs into this one person who is manipulating, exploiting, and controlling us.
Mm-hmm.
And now we don't have the normal rules of society and the normal rules of law to govern us. Everything Amy says is now the truth and is the facts. So that to me is where it becomes really dangerous and where it becomes a cult.
Right.
Because like we're kind of removing we are removing normal ways of thinking, and we're now in a position where, are you really free to leave? Are you kind of being held here against your will, even if it's not like physically being held against your will?
Mm-hmm.
Because now you
Well,
are,
yeah. If you can't
yeah,
leave without consequence, there's an issue.
right.
And my problem with the first definition you gave is there are so many cults that also are not religious. I think a lot of the
Oh,
ones that are popular are, but
mm-hmm.
there's political cults. There's like other aspects of
QAnon.
cults. Yeah. Like Nexium, that like
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
there's so
Nexium's a great example.
many that aren't necessarily religious, but they second one you gave is they have those core beliefs that you have to live by and you have to do with that, or there's serious consequences.
Right. Because like
And
I think that there are a lot of accepted religions that
right,
have very
that could
dangerous
be
and extreme
cults.
beliefs
Oh,
that are
100%.
cults. I
Totally
think
agree
that
with
you
you.
pretty much could say that they are all cults. Like, to
Yeah,
me, they are all
you can
cults.
argue anything if you try hard enough, because
For
it's
sure.
also the idea of if you don't agree with it, you can also claim it as a cult. So it's that weird
Yeah.
gray of at what point does it become dangerous? In my like, if you want to join a cult that doesn't hurt anybody, fine. But like, what cults don't
But
hurt people?
it
That's the big
seems
thing.
like it
Crime
seems
isn't
like
fun.
in all of these cults, at least the ones that I'm aware of, and like we could use Nexium and Scientology, like these examples, it all leads to abuse. It all leads to
Oh yeah.
financial abuse, to sexual abuse, to these
Mhm.
ridiculous power dynamics that are never going to work. And like these people were being used to like live stream 24 hours a day so
Well, I
that
think
Amy
that
could
stuff's
look
so
on
important.
Amazon and
Hmm.
buy herself little doodads on Amazon and never have to work. And
Oh
these
yeah. Well,
people
you
are
have
being forced to stay awake. They're using sleep deprivation as
yep,
like a tool to control and
a
exploit and
maximum of
manipulate.
4 hours a day they were allowed to sleep. Maximum.
They were barely eating. And when you're barely eating and barely sleeping, you are way easier to manipulate and way
100%.
easier to exploit and control. And that's the second definition, I think, to a T. And it's a good tactic if you want to quickly brainwash someone.
Right. And the United States, one issue I have with some of the laws in this country is there's no laws currently in existence that protect people from high control groups. And
Mm.
there are
I love
in
that
other
term.
countries. Yeah. And but right now is if Amy was still alive, she technically has no laws that prohibit her from her actions. Yes, in my opinion, she psychologically abused people where if you didn't, and there's plenty of videos to support this, if you didn't do exactly what she asked when she asked, she flipped out. She would scream at you, she'd throw things at you. If you slept more than a couple hours at a time, you got berated to get up and do things and serve Mother God. You were manipulated and physically abused. In theory, there's no video evidence of it, but also they were all told to drink this Korak silver that clearly
Ugh.
is extremely dangerous. You were told you can't
So,
purchase things individually, but Amy could buy whatever she wants, but you as a
I mean,
member can't buy
you're
anything.
not allowed you're not allowed to have your own money. And if you
Hmm.
keep your money to yourself, you are considered hoarding resources from mother. And that's
Hmm.
a really big deal in their cult. But I've never heard of that there are laws in other countries that are like, I guess, protect against cults. Like, how does that work?
So it's more of a new thing coming through where they're starting to realize that there are groups out there that are dangerous. I know, like Scientology, for example, is illegal in other countries because of
Mm.
the destruction that they have given. I think Australia is one of the ones that they're like, you're not welcome here.
Oh, I love
Certain
Australia.
European countries are starting to put things in motion of like, you can't do this to people without consequences. Um, and
Well,
then
not
obviously,
everywhere
I think
has.
there's a bar to hit, but at what point does it you brainwashing someone and manipulating someone? At what point does that be? Is it not okay? Because right now, legally, totally okay.
Well, here we have freedom of religion, and this falls under that umbrella. And that's also
Which,
why they were tax exempt.
hmm
They had the
which brings me
status,
to that
which
whole
is a huge problem.
odd question. Oh, don't get me. I'm sure I will go on a rant about the whole religious exemption at some point.
It
Um,
causes so many problems.
I have such an issue with that law.
It
Um,
is so motivating to turn anything into a church because then you don't have to fucking pay taxes.
right. Because, like, and then here too, you have fraud in so many examples. You have
Mm-hmm.
unemployment fraud where members are claiming to be unemployed, getting money and giving it to the group.
That's
You
true.
have people liquidating all of their assets and putting it
Yeah.
through. And it's, again, being categorized under a nonprofit religious sect that can't be taxed. They have, I think I saw numbers between 300,000 and like $800,000 in this account, and there were 20 people there,
I
like
mean,
who didn't work.
it's supposed to be a not-for-profit organization, but it's impossible to argue that Amy wasn't solely profiting from this. She
Oh,
was.
100%. Hmm.
She was raking it in. There was direct donations also that you could make to buy Amy specific things. Like on their websites, you could donate to buy Amy a drink. You could donate to send her on a date. You could donate to she loved video games on her phone. So if you
Oh,
wanted to
her
send
go
her money
kart.
for Candy Crush or whatever,
Don't
you
forget her
could.
go kart. She got very upset because it didn't come fast enough.
I mean, that also would drive me nuts. I hate waiting for things to be delivered. I mean,
But
we're
you
still waiting
know,
for someone to even pick up her body.
that's true. The Galactics are slacking.
I know.
Um, I think there's a lot of criminal-esque things in here,
Yeah.
but nothing that would ever actually be prosecuted, which is unfortunate.
Right.
Granted, she
Like,
obviously is no longer with us, but it's too, I don't want to say too bad, but for the people that are involved and the families of the people involved, there's no accountability. And I think that's where I struggle.
that is really hard pill to swallow. I mean, even if she was alive, I agree. She wouldn't be charged with anything. Even though I think she's doing a lot of things that are wrong. And I think that if
Mhm.
you removed the it's a religion aspect, it would be easier. Like if she did not have a religion and she was just keeping people hostage in her home and not letting them sleep and not letting them eat and taking all of their money, I feel like those things are illegal.
Yeah.
But if it's they're choosing, quote, quote, to do it because it's their religion,
Hmm.
then it's fine.
Yeah. And I think the only thing that eventually could catch up with her would have been the fraud, the financial fraud,
Yeah, probably.
and the child abuse. Because you can be charged with child abuse if you're in charge of the home and it's not, even if it's not your child. Because,
She was abusing children, for
yeah.
sure.
And even animals. There's videos of her, quote unquote, disciplining her cat, but it absolutely is her being horrible
Yeah.
to this little defenseless animal. And it's one of those things that at what point do people step in? But the problem with these small groups is infiltrating them is hard. And truly understanding what's happening is hard
Yeah.
until they blow up.
Well,
Like,
Amy made it so that the group was based around her ultimate death, essentially.
right.
Like it was smart, really, the way she did that because she essentially had a prophecy that she was going to die. And so that when she died, it proves her right.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not familiar with any other groups where the leader has done that. It's usually that they're going to like live forever or,
Right. Which
but
honestly,
she
I'm a little proud of her for.
yeah, it's
Like,
smart.
that was very smart. Most don't
And
follow through.
and like when today I was like looking up like her cause of death and reading stuff from her autopsy, and I was a little surprised that she didn't have cancer. Even though I know that she was lying about everything all the time, I still
Right.
kind of thought maybe she did have it and it was a contributing factor.
But
And
again,
instead, it said that she died from complications of being an alcoholic, from
mhm,
anorexia, and from acute colloidal silver poisoning.
yeah. But again,
So
it's
she
that
didn't even
whole
have cancer.
idea of it second guesses yourself, even though you know what you're looking at.
I know.
And I think it's
She was
interesting
gaslighting
that,
me.
oh, 100%. Without even talking to you, you're falling into, you should just become a member.
I
What name
know.
do you need? You need a name.
I I
We'll
miss her
message Hope.
though. She's already gone.
She's
Maybe one of
probably
the fathers will
reincarnated
take
yet.
me. Well, I'm sure
That's
she's
true.
reincarnated. Although
Yeah,
I think
we
she
just
said
gotta
this was
wait
her
for her to
last
rise
life.
again.
This might be her last
Oh,
one though.
maybe. I don't know. We'll have to wait and
I don't
see.
know. She contradicted herself a bunch. Yeah. Well, I guess if she came back, she'd still be really young at this point.
Yeah, she's got to grow up a little before she can reinstate the group.
Yeah. I will say my favorite part of everything that I've watched about her and everything I've read and listened to is how offended Dr. Phil was by her existence. Like, I could watch that all the time. He is like such a Texan Christian. And when she was
Yeah.
saying with a complete straight face that she was the reincarnate of, like, she had been Jesus in a previous life and could
Oh, his
remember
wife's face was
dying
my
on the
favorite.
cross. And he was like, so you are saying that you're Jesus. You're Jesus. And she was like, yep, 100%.
Yeah, that's me.
He just like could not even, and like I don't know. He's a problematic dude as well, but
Sure.
I thought they were very funny together.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
could easily have
And
watched an
from
ongoing
the
thing
other
with them.
side of it, her family was like upset he didn't offer her help. But how do you offer someone help that has a zero, like, no, this is 100% correct? There's no swaying on it. You can't offer help to someone like that. And then
That's so
Amy was
true.
disappointed that it was Dr. Phil and not Oprah. Because
But I don't
Oprah
know
would have
what could have
shared her
helped.
message.
I don't know what could have helped.
Nothing. Because you can't help someone who doesn't want help. And the people in these positions of power and groups, 99% of the time, don't leave. Because why would you? You have people bowing down at your feet. You have unlimited funds. You have, for her, unlimited drugs and alcohol. You have people fawning all over you. You have men who love you and fall all over you. Like, she's built her perfect world. Why would you leave that?
Except at the end.
True.
Where she wanted to go to the hospital and they wouldn't take her. But like she just created a hell of her own making. She made it so it was impossible, even though she should have been on hospice at that point.
Which, and I can't even imagine the amount of pain that she legitimately was probably in.
So much pain. I mean, I have some issues with Amy, but no one should have to suffer like that. It's just like so
again,
sad.
Her own making, which you said, but she constantly was telling her followers she was in pain all of the time. And that's why she had used alcohol and drugs so often, because it was a quote unquote tool to get her closer to the frequency to help the world. And it wasn't because she wanted to get high or drunk. It's because she was using them as a working tool for her pain. And if you're constantly telling people you're already in pain, and then one day you legitimately are in pain when she started to die, it takes away. It's that crying wolf thing. If you say you're eventually, people are like, oh, well, she's been withstanding this pain for years. What's the difference?
That's so true. I just want to quickly touch on one more thing. Yeah. Which I don't know if anyone else is going to care about, but like it really stuck out to me. So they were talking about the third, fourth, and fifth dimension a lot. Yes. And Amy is in where she was. I don't know where she is now. She was in the fifth dimension, which is like where everyone should be. To my understanding, that's where we were before the fall of whatever, where we all ascended or descended to the third dimension. And they're using these terms, which they don't understand clearly because they're not using them correctly. But I work in a field. I work in a field where I use physics all the time because I do ultrasound. And in ultrasound, we do 2D, 3D, and 4D imaging. And so 3D is width, height, and depth. That is like the world that we're in. And in ultrasound, it's the difference from having like those grayscale images to showing depth. That's the difference. And so with depth, that's how you create like those 3D renderings where you can see like a baby's face, for example, and you can see it like the real structures of it. So like that's the difference between 2 and 3D. And then if you put it in 4D, it's just showing it in real time. So 4D is 3D in real time. Amy in 5D, which is such a scammer thing to say, and if anyone is listening to this that has gotten a 5D ultrasound, it is not real, and you should ask for your money back. That is not a thing. It's a thing that scam studios promote, but it is not a real thing. The fifth dimension in physics, which is the same in ultrasound, is conceptual. 5D is a conceptual, unobservable micro dimension of space. That doesn't even make any sense. How are you living in that? You're in a micro dimension? In a conceptual, I can't even say this word, but an unobservable micro dimension. It is not perceptible.
It's crazy because Amy's explanation, which is a little smart, where the world is 3D because you have to get people to believe that they're living in something. And then she plays off 3D,
but it's also 4D.
Idea. Yeah,
yes, that's true. Like, she definitely doesn't know anything about physics, and she just watched The Matrix, which great movie.
Great movie. And a lot of people in these groups take advantage because you're totally right. If you think about it, and the legitimate of what she's saying doesn't make any sense. But if you take that conspiracy theory mindset of the Matrix, that we're living in this 3D world that isn't real, She was in the 5D world, which is past the matrix, and she understood how it worked.
It's just really set off my scammer alarm.
Oh yeah. And you're totally right, because if you think about it and you look down, you're like, hold on a minute, that's not a thing. Just like her fifth stage cancer, it's not a thing. Like,
yeah, that she didn't even have, and I knew the whole time that she was lying about everything, and I still was shocked that she didn't have cancer.
Yeah, I know.
So it's like anytime there's a cult, I always am like, how could they get me to join this? Like, would I be susceptible to joining this cult? And maybe if I was doing a lot of acid. But the second they took away the drugs, I would be out skis. Yeah.
See how when it comes to cults, I think we should look at how they would get us. So yours would be drugs. Yeah. I think mine would be the commitment of it. I'm very much someone who likes to like see things through. And if you're sitting there telling me like, if you do X, Y, and Z, like you're gonna have this like overarching viewpoint. Because I think it was Faith and Hope and Aurora. They were like, yeah, now like as we were there, we earned the ability to talk to the Galactics myself. I'd be like, bullshit. I need to hear this. I need to hear Robin Williams' voice. How do I do it? Like,
just get me to Robin. That also would have worked, I think. If they actually had Robin Williams, I would have been like, all right.
Like,
I mean, I can stay for a little bit. All right, I do want to meet Robin, so I'll stay for that, and then
I'll stay to earn my right. And then
at some point, she banned all drugs and alcohol from the members. It didn't apply to her or father,
just
of course, but that I think would have been the point where I would have been plotting my escape, and that says way more about me than it does about people in the cult. But like, if there wasn't drugs anymore, I'd be, why are we doing this? This is
right. But it's interesting.
So boring.
She takes all that away, and they're still there. They're working even harder. And I think it's like the money might have started running out. She's like, I got to be strategic about this now. So, yeah. She's an interesting one.
Meanwhile, I thought we'd have nothing to talk about.
I know.
About this, but I guess not.
Well, I remember when we started, like, if you just watch the documentary, because it's only told from one perspective, as all are, it seems like there's not a lot there. But I remember when all of this was happening, because during COVID, I discovered it and down a hill, because what else did we have to do?
Some of us worked in hospitals, so we were at work every day.
I went to work most of the time.
Okay. All right.
But it was like, I had no social life. You go to work and you go home. So when I went home, I learned about cults instead of people. And I mean, that's why I was like, we have to talk about her, because it's all very subtle crime and subtle abuse that will connect, I think, to a lot of other groups that we talk about, between the religious aspect and the matrix aspect, manipulation, child abuse, fraud. I think all of these tie into, like you said, she pulled things from so many other groups. That Twin Flame, that's something we haven't talked about yet, but we're going to talk about later in the podcast.
Definitely. I would love to talk about Twin Flames, which I guess you learned about around the same time.
Exactly. Was also super popular at that time. And her twin flames were these father gods. So, but it's a twist on Twin Flame, because Twin Flame, you're only supposed to have one, but she had 4. So I think she's interesting, where if you listen to more episodes, you're going to hear different things that sound familiar from this episode.
That's true. I mean, I found her very interesting, and I do love like a matriarchal cult and learning about that.
Yes. Because there are not many of them, which I do appreciate her ambition. So
for sure,
good for her.
And even her ability to just be like, "You're not Father God anymore," and like demote people and fire them is so funny.
Yeah.
And like I kind of
like,
respect that.
Yeah. A horrible person, did lots of terrible things, but you gotta give the woman credit. She did great.
And I did read some stuff that she had like inappropriate relationships with like teenagers in the group, and had like a sexual relationship with a teenager. I don't know how like substantiated that was, but I believe it 100%.
Oh yeah.
I just still think that it's kind of nice in a matriarchal cult that there is less sexual abuse than I would say most other cults I'm familiar with.
I would
So,
agree.
you know, that's a win for women, honestly.
Yeah. Look at us starting cults and shit.
Yeah.
All
Well, we're
right.
trying to
Well,
start one, working on it.
I know. One day, one day. This is our, I don't know if this is the framework we want, but
No, but you know, we have to figure it out still.
yeah. All right. Any final notes on Miss Amy Mother God?
I think I'm good, but really, really, if you've paid for a 5D ultrasound, email me. It is not real.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. And then we will see you soon on our next Mother.
Yes, we will. Next mother coming up soon. All right, Crystal, I'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye.